They're not here. I think everyone would like to give them a round of applause. So welcome back and welcome to our online audience. We're about to go live to Chicago, where EMMANUEL Pratt is waiting. He's going to talk about his work with the Sweetwater Foundation, connections to Ireland, his thoughts on values when we think about investment into places. And this is 20 minutes. Now, immediately after this, some of you are going to stay in the room for the next section, which is Galway 2020, which I see Liz waiting over there to do. And some of you will go over to the college to talk about Kells or to the Reimagine Cafe in the parish centre. So if you can just move quickly after this, just so we can keep things moving. And I see a man waiting very patiently in Chicago. I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say. It gives me great pleasure to welcome on screen from Chicago to Carlow, EMMANUEL Pratt.
Thanks so much. Just quick confirmation that you can hear me good. All right. So, all right. We have the question of how we deal with investing in people and places. Man, I'm getting a crazy echo. So the main question we have to address is like, this is an issue of public. So if we have people as representing the public of or relating to groups of people and the public as a place, then we have to address this very seriously because there's a multiplicity of publics, public architecture, air, water, art, affairs, policy. How do we address the issue of value? So value is, the noun is like the worth. What's it worth? And then the value is the verb is how is it appraised and how is it useful over time? So especially pertinent with respect to the built environment and as we're shaping the future of our cities. So we often get caught up with this duality of a priori and a posteriori. So one is a priori is deductive and it's usually presumptive and it is conceived beforehand, a vision of a future. The a posteriori is inductive and usually from observation, but unfortunately, a lot of times these get reduced to a bounded rationality that is much more quantitative versus qualitative, and they're preconceived and they become distant. And they're limited in the cognitive capacity in a relationship to the information and time constraints, and you satisfice. Satisfice meaning you have a suboptimal decision, which leads oftentimes to an inattentional blindness. And neuropsychology and the mind in the brain science world, they're looking at how do we miss things that are right in front of our noses. So you get these pretty shiny images and pictures of utopian futures that are often at a high price point, that are not connected to anything grounded in just a catchphrase like food hub or eco or sustainable. But as you scale out over time and scale, it becomes less and less connected to any form of ecology of place or humanity. So the question is, what does that mean for our public policy? What does it mean for public economics? What does it mean for our public financing? What does it mean for our public good? And again, this is almost always reducing the government to a quantitative metric. How do we calculate a formula and predict it so we can control it and force it to become what it needs to be over however long to get our returns on investment? So I challenge that it's time for a paradigm shift. I think we all in the room agree. So as an example, I'm just going to share here, south side of Chicago. Sweetwater Foundation, our tagline is there grows the neighborhood. We focus on regenerative neighborhood development to create safe and inspiring, healthy neighborhood, human development. It's really all it is, like transforming the ecology of blighted neighborhoods, but it's any neighborhood, any community. We operate in the third sector, what we call the third sector. In between the public and private, while the decisions are trying to be made, life happens, and we're in the social economy. So take, for instance, where I'm sitting right now, south side of Chicago, 2013, 2014, was asked to come into a site that was hollowed out over time. And it took a second to understand what was this? This site shows that it's this slide shows that it was mixed bag, commercial, manufacturing, residential, but nothing there. And the quick scan showed that the housing stock had been depreciated over time. This is like years of disinvestment in the south and west side of Chicago that became the typical narrative. And it's driven by this notion of blight. In the States, we have this thing about urban decay and blight, but it really comes from, and I think Ireland knows this particularly well, the blight and the death and decay of a crop, so that it no longer sustains life. And that's a tool that has been used to economically devaluate select communities here. So we have this really conflicted duality of a superliminal conscious and subliminal messaging, unconscious. So it affects how we understand and perceive things, but we have to go back in time and understand, how do we get here? So if you look at the snapshot of the same neighborhood in 1895, 1926, it was this dense, full neighborhood. It wasn't until the Depression in April 1st, 1936, nationally, where racial restrictive covenants were put in place that shaped the value, saying if it's certain populations of class, you will not receive, it result in a reduction of value. So of course, that leads to the devaluation and mapping and erasure of a site when it says that you have to control this group that is being monopolized by the colored race, and then you have to form protective real estate agencies. This is from the language that was shaped into the policy that led into redlining. So let's take the same site, and then over a period of time, by 1949, where it was starting to be reduced as the housing footprint, it's erased within 60 years. 60 years, 2 generations, hollowed out by policy shaped by its subliminal and supraliminal messaging of redlining and erasure and degrading and devaluing the humans there, the people there, all of it erased, the ecology there. And studies are coming out now saying that this is wrong. Well, no kidding. So there's a phrase that we like to embrace, that if you look at the street view, Google Street View from 2011, they tried to bury us, but they didn't know that we were seeds. So we fast forward to present day. We've transformed that same site into a farm that is the epicenter of the neighborhood. And it is abundance. There's so much tomatoes, peppers, squash, every form of potatoes. Actually, that is a story how we connected to Ireland when it was eating around potatoes at the Museum of Modern Art. All of these connections that reconnected the people, that reconnected us to the place, that reconnected us to food, that reconnected us to each other. And there's always this abundance over time, this repetitive routine, ritual, and reflection that gets to reshape the environment over the seasons that keeps us in awe of nature. This is the South Side of Chicago, right? 12 minutes downtown. Through the seasons, through practices that begin to understand how to adapt and adjust. This is the snow, notice the doors open. We create the structure so the snow loads are have to keep the crops covered, but we're still growing year round. This was a couple weeks ago, this is yesterday. Plenty of abundance, and nighttime we just cover crops. But I love the colors and the frames, and we're just learning from the season, the reason. But the ecology is defining our place. Our connection with the bees and the butterflies and all of the insects, the grasshoppers, the birds, and reconnecting literally to the praying mantises. We get to admire the true artist, which is nature. There's no better artist than Mother Nature. And we get to admire and respect nature firsthand because we also mutually benefit like honey. And ecopreneurs that are looking at how to cultivate peaches and fruits. So another example, right across the street, we have a housing typology. It was a foreclosed house in Linden. It was valued at some egregious like $500,000 marks, foreclosed for $31,000. And it was left to rot because it's so-called blight. So here we go, 2011, 2019. Created the spaces down, created the garden bed, did the art mural, reinvented the public space directly tied to the growing, cultivating, the art, and people show. And as people show, we connect at the think, do house. Think it, do it, share it, remix it, cook it, love it. And then appreciate art in nature. So we have screen printing classes, we have all types of workshops that happen in the spaces. So we become a destination point, a field trip. The same house that was foreclosed had no value. Now it becomes the most valuable asset in the neighborhood for the schools, for the residents. We're actually ironic now, tourism, but we don't really focus on the tourism aspect. We focus on humans. We focus on people that are here that are at risk of being displaced. So when we have these market opportunities, it's not because it's about money, it's about us reconnecting to each other, to our place, to our nature, to the spaces that are calling us to be there, to humanity. So these spaces started to open up where people gather, and of course, under the shade in music. When the pandemic hit, it created more value to the space, to the place, to the reason, to reconnections. So we just adjusted accordingly. It didn't really affect us that much. We just focused in and cultivated our work. And so the Think Do House became more like public school. A place for play, a place for relaxation, connection, and peace. So during this period, the first couple of years, we determined like we need to have a manifesto. We need to just think about what is the value of public, the multiplicity of colors. So I'll take you through a couple of spaces of installations as examples. So Think Do Pod, Smart Pipe. All it is a shipping container that's married to a greenhouse with some solar panels in that. It's not just all it is, but and to the banner. So we have this installation that the drawings don't really do any value or justice to it. It is situated directly in context to the Think Do House and to garden beds and across the street from the farm, which creates and defines the place where people can come on their own time at their own leisure. And while we're doing our cultivation, our agriculture, our seedlings, basil, lettuce, and working in a public easement, in a public alleyway, create spaces for conversations and convenings and sharing and moments of reflection. So people can, again, take a moment to pause and question and reconnect. Directly across from that, we have workshop, work, stop, you get it. So it's just a greenhouse, but it's not just a greenhouse. It's polycarbonate, it's some wood, it's metal materials and shipping container for storage, but it's the people that make the place as we restore and appreciate and love that wood that people are otherwise throwing away. So as we've created a culture that disposes of wood, because on those shiny buildings that we showed images of earlier, they're disposing, when the windows get delivered, the wood is tossed. So we claim the wood and reclaim the wood and appreciate the rains and appreciate the wasted materials and give it a home, and the reason through our education to teach how to prepare and how to prep so that we have available stock that increases the life cycle and value of that wood, and teach through education and drilling and sharing and making and building furniture and finding each other in cooperation in the public easement. So design, of course, is important. You have to look good and feel good. So as we're doing these workshops and connecting in public, more people show up. And the weather's changed, and so we got to go outside. It doesn't stop us. We're around. So as we are still learning and refining and honing skills, actually, when winter hits and the fall hits, when we actually shine our carpentry, we get to prepare the workshop to be ready for a workshop. So we have residential workshops about how to make things like beds, how to do a garden bed or a bed at home. How do you learn how to appreciate chisels and tools and techniques that you make your own mallet and tools from discarded wood that would otherwise land in a landfill that you can then put into your garage, you can put into your house. Learn how to draw, learn how to visualize, learn how to respect the art and craft of drawing and visualization. So we refined our techniques and we started to add 3 components that we started to teach. So when we have these products that everyone's asking for now, that we can't keep up with, which is a good thing, because there's slowly a market in it. We get to experiment on new ideas like butterfly roof water catchment system that you start to marry solar panels to. You can increase your energy potential to run a sump pump and increase your maximum efficiency for watering a 2-acre city block by hand. We don't have machinery. We actually don't even have electricity or water access on the site. But then the object becomes a design object that's situated in nature, embraced by nature. But then we get to dream and play with fire, literally, and come up with new ideas and installations. So May 2011, 2021, a decade later, we have a market space directly across the street called the Meeting House. It's a place to eat. It's a place to share. It's a place to convene. The drawings don't do any justice. If you just submit the drawings, they just look like an object, but it's the people and the ecology of the place that make it resonate. The spaces for humanity. When you have the drums, you have the children, you have the graduation, you have the cooking demonstrations, you have the garden and greenhouse, public greenhouse for the neighborhood that when it's colder turns into a homeschool. That turns into a field trip destination directly across the street, another house. The reconstruction house, fast forward, we turned it into a gallery. Ground floor of an art gallery, and a gathering space for reflection, for remembering, for sharing. But we've advanced that through technology. We've used live streams. So we're able to do cooking demonstrations and record those and share them with a network of various partners. So we have remembering sessions. How do we come together to remember and remember? How do we come together and share and celebrate our elders and share that story with our youth? So we can actually come together as humans. So now we have film screenings. We have all types of gatherings in the reconstruction house. And the guest space. The last space is the week of the thought barn. First timber frame barn hand raised in the city of Chicago since the fire, partnered with the woodworking studio. So like this, again, is a pavilion. It's the one that celebrates the wood. Drawings don't do any justice because it's just a static representation, but it's when the music, the celebrations of life that actually happen that make that place. It's the culture. It's the wisdom, it's the ideas, it's the energy shared when people come together and convene and just take a moment to appreciate nature, life, light, and the seasons. Again, we have so many sunflowers that pop up. We have so many birds, we have so much hail, colors, whatever. And when the seed changes, the polycarbonate material allows us to be indoors. And we still celebrate we do our routines and rituals preparing for the next season. And over time, we claim the streets, we claim the spaces. We've demonstrated the capacity to build our homes. We've demonstrated the capacity to do installations. We've changed from foreclosed houses to public schools, vacant houses to public galleries. We've changed vacant lots to public parks. And so in action, it is about commonwealth, collective wealth. We have a university, which we'll get to in a second. It embraces the arts and the market. So we cultivate communities from the ground up, and it's a relationship from top down and bottom up, where we're living this multiplicity of time and place and sharing the food every day. It's the neighborhood. It's the rhythm and the feel of the neighborhood. So the public has become the epicenter of our show in the Thought Barn. So this is a quick example. We created a model of the neighborhood to be a gallery, to be a virtual show that you can now get a virtual tour and a walkthrough. It's like a Google Street View. Every one of the slides and the panels is a lesson plan that has a link to it, and we can go through and understand how to get here. But there's not enough time for that right now. So we have an international network of interns coming from multiple universities all around the world. They're saying, I want to be part of something new and meaningful. So we have network value-based partners, some of which are actually in Ireland, that we are remapping our spaces of city and creating a portfolio of possibilities and just creating documentation after documentation of how it changes the structure of the organization, the narrations, the blogs, how do we do and share and reimagine the future so that it becomes hopeful. We have created a catalog of possibility that then changes the visual representation of the space and place, but is locally rooted in the image of the people from the area. And so when we dare to dream of things like the rebirth of new building, it's limited by unbounded possibilities. Because it's only through proximity of ecology, of place, its land, its people, that you can actually gain the tacit knowledge to do real transformation. So in conclusion, we have space, we have neighborhood. This is the neighborhood, and it is real. And then since 2014 to present, we have now the commonwealth that is situated in our values of regeneration, small and beautiful, chaotic, balance, chaos, and order, reaching back to the present to move forward. A seventh generation principle of open source changes the structures of our consciousness. And one last thing I'd be remiss, I was so confused when I was asked to be here. I mean, I'm excited to be here, but I was like, why? And I forgot, this is a connection that goes way back. I mean, one of my greatest idols was Douglas, and I always go back to visit his connection to Ireland. And most don't really know about that connection to Ireland. They had to get him out of the country to here to he was killed. To be away, and he was transformed by his connection in Ireland in 1845. And then the Choctaw also created a connection through their gift of humanity when they're after a trail of years. That has found its way back during the pandemic, and the gift, the reciprocal gift, and the structures, the sculptures, the celebration that's now leading to a scholarship program. And we stand on the shoulders of giants of time and history. So I like to close with this. While many of us will become students of history to help interpret and understand world developments, we need to become students of the future. Futuring is based upon hope. Hope gives us not only direction and meaning to our visions and actions, it gives us confidence in what we become. It affirms our existence and connects us to the future. It gives us the nourishment, purpose, and energy for our actions. So there grows the neighborhood.
Emmanuel, I don't know if you can hear, but you had a rapt audience here. This is an audience who are totally fed up with Zoom, but the love of Zoom has started again. The use of time-lapse was fantastic to bring to life and some wonderful phrases like spaces for humanity or the rhythm and feel of a neighborhood. And I know there's a session afterwards, people are going to want to ask you questions, so I won't detain you now. There'll be a lot of, I know, just from looking out here, there was huge interest in your presentation, and thank you very, very much. Chicago, we all thought it was a windy city. I've changed it to the snowy city. It was far too much so there for human beings to go and waste any time in Chicago. It was wonderful to look at. Thank you for that inspiration and your work, and I know people will be very, very energized by it, and I know there'll be a full session. Now that's at 3:20 when you can chat with Emmanuel, and that's in the Carlow College, which is the building which is left of the marquee over there. Now, some of you will have signed up now for the Reimagine Cafe, and that's with St. Joyce, and then some of you people have signed up for CALS, the bigger picture. So if you want to go to those now, because we're about to start our next session, which is our session to do with Galway 2020. I'm going to invite Liz Meaney up there with her panel. Galway achieved the designation of European Capital of Culture in 2020 after a successful bid process, and it had many challenges from storms to a pandemic, but delivered so many aspects of the programme, investing in the creative and the cultural sector of Galway. So today, they're going to talk about the legacy, the learning and values, and what was one of the biggest cultural events in People and Place in Ireland. So I'm delighted to introduce, and Liz will introduce our panel, Liz Meaney from the Arts Council, who will moderate this session with the panels.
Good afternoon, and thank you, and it's lovely to see you all here today. I think firstly, we're going to start with a short video showcasing Galway 2020, so you can get a sense of what Galway 2020 was and what it will lead to in the future, and then we'll come back and introduce our panel and enter into a discussion. Thank you.
Era. Shinna shin no kuholen san chalioch vera. No na flaha for our shan rid egg the Christ. Shinna era. Oigeshin. No on Kirsach is ognia, no childres. Krolov Liosan Aswil e.
We are Ireland, older than Cuchulainn and the Hag of Bear, than the chieftains our ancestors served before the death of Christ. We are Ireland, younger than Pierce and Connolly, that Schillers who shook the hands of his own executioners.
We are those who went away and those who remain, those who came and stayed.
We are the sons and daughters of all the dreamers. Our dreams may yet become us.
Okay, so there we have a sense of Galway, and the people and artists, the audiences, the makers, the producers were Galway 2020. And even spotted a house I used to live in off Tata. So Galway 2020, Galway was the 62nd European Capital of Culture, a designation which is awarded by the European Capital of Culture, or by the European Commission. Its sister city was Rijeka. Thank you. In Croatia, and it was the third time that Ireland had held the designation. Previously, it had been Dublin in 1991 and Cork in 2005, which I myself was involved in. Galway was one of 4 candidate cities in Ireland that year and was designated European Capital of Culture 2020 in July 2016. And unusually, it's a joint bid and a joint presentation between city and county, which is one of the more unusual approaches to the history of the designation. The banner for the bid, Making Ways, and it was shaped around themes of migration, landscape and language. Village. And the programme was launched in September of 2019. It was set to run from February 20 to February 21 to match the Celtic year. And I think we all know what happened in March of 2020. So, it, as with every other capital culture, faced some challenges. I don't know of any others that faced pandemic, I have to say. But so we're joined here today, and what I'm going to do is ask the panel to each introduce themselves. We have Brendan McGrath, who's Chief Exec of Galway City Council, Paul Fahy, who's joining us online, the Artistic Director of Galway International Arts Festival, Marilyn, who was involved in Galway 2020, previously to that was the Art Officer for Galway County Council, Patricia Philbin, who's now the Director of Service in Galway City Council, and was also the Director of Galway 2020, and Sinead O'Hara from the Department of Culture, Tourism, Art Sport, Gaelic and the Media, which I'm always proud of myself for So I might ask each of you individually to just introduce yourselves and outline us what your role was in European capital culture. Brendan, if I could ask you to go first, please.
Thanks, Liz. I became Chief Executive of Galway back in June 2013, and when I applied to public appointment service at that time, said one of my ambitions to achieve during my role was to make Galway European capital culture in 2020, and it's one we managed to deliver with a lot of effort and a lot of help from. So I have nearly less than 2 years to run my contract, and I have about 46 years experience this year in the appointment, so maybe I'm past myself I did time to that, but I hope that I would help bring a group together initially around the capital culture idea and get people to work together and to go from there. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I think we'll come back and talk about this more, but I think the central motivation and energy that comes from local authority in leading bids for European capital culture is crucial in the realisation. So I think that leadership role is vital. Marilyn, I might ask you to talk a little bit about, introduce yourself and talk to your role.
Sure. I love the way you say Marilyn was involved. Yeah, in lots of different ways. I came in as the County Arts Officer in 2015, I think. Initially to work on bid, and then in the design and development of the programme, I had a number of different roles in different ways and means, and then had the wonderful task in May 2020 of taking over the programme after the second creative director had departed. So it was a significant challenge, certainly for me in my career, to be honest, but it was one that I'm very grateful for, actually, because it allowed us the opportunity to support a wide number of cultural partners in the pandemic at a very significant and very challenging time. And as you correctly say, it was only one of many challenges, but we did realise how big it was going to be at that time. I mean, bearing in mind when the pandemic came, we thought it might last a couple of weeks. How naive, but here we are today, and it's great to be here in person, actually, to see so many faces that we haven't seen over the years.
Thanks, Lynn. And Paul, I might ask you to introduce yourself and talk about your role.
Thank you very much, Liz. Hello, everybody. You in person. My name is Paul Fahy. I'm the Artistic Director of Galway International Arts Festival. We were the commissioners of John Gerard's Mer, which is one of the flagship projects of Galway 2020, an art installation in two parts. The first of which took place in Galway City, the Cloughjordan, on the middle here in the Cloughjordan, structural Mer Pavilion, which was a 7 metre by 7 metre by 7 metre mirrored cube, mirrored on 4 sides, and then on one side a custom built LED screen. The second installation which was the cube again, took place Derry Bog in Connemara, which is an area very protected bogland in Ireland, about 50 miles away from Galway City. The second that took place on the screen there was called Lead Work, and John Gerard is kind of one of our leading artists. He works in simulation, everything he does digitally creative. He works with an amazing team, and ecology and environmental concerns are at the heart of what he does. And although the pieces, and I'll talk a little bit more about them later on, they were virtual portraits of a place, given the topic of our conference today, and also actual portraits of a place in that they're reflected the environment all around.
Thanks, Paul. Okay. And Patricia, I'd ask you to talk about your role within 2020 and your current role as well, as I know is relevant for the future.
Yeah, I suppose when Brendan joined Galway City Council in 2013, I was the head of the Economic, Culture and Community Department, so one of the tasks was to advance in terms of Galway getting prepared to do the bid for the European Capital Culture, which was where I met first when you came to visit our senior management team to highlight the opportunity that was there for Galway. So then through 2014 to 16, I was project director for the bid until we won the designation, and then I rejoined Galway 2020 in late 2018 as CEO until June of last year. So currently I am Director of Services for Planning, Housing, Economic Development and Culture, Galway City.
Fantastic, and we can talk about that in terms of the cultural strategy and the legacy as well. And Sinead O'Hara is here from the department. Sinead.
Thanks, Liz. Afternoon, everyone. So my name is Sinead O'Hara. I work in Culture Ireland in the Department of Tourism, Culture, Arts, Sport and Media. I'm still processing that myself sometimes. So my role basically was as part of the Culture Ireland team to oversee in that respect and support the delivery of Galway 2020. I work on EU cultural policy. Part of that is a Creative Europe programme, which obviously the European Capital of Culture Action falls under. So it was maybe in part with colleagues in the department to support the delivery of Galway 2020.
Great, thanks, Sinead. So I suppose I should introduce myself and so maybe everybody else do it. I'm Liz Meaney, I'm the Arts Director of Performing Arts, the Arts Council. Prior to that, I was the Arts Officer for Cork City Council. So I was involved in the initial bid for Cork to become Cork 2005 European Capital of Culture. And then during the year itself, I was on the Board of Directors and I was involved to post in the realisation of legacy of Cork 2005. And I think European Capital of Culture knew very many strange, unusual and memorable moments. Of my most memorable was finding a place for a Scottish company called Gridiron to do site-specific work in around 2003 and having to walk over a dead rat as I entered into the old city morgue for Cork City Council so that they do a site-specific installation. That was a memorable moment, yeah. What I loved. But it means many different things. I think, Marilyn, it might be good if you could just talk a little bit about what is the European Capital of Culture.
I think, to be fair, I think it means something very different depending on where you're come to it from. European Capital of Culture should be about people, place and participation and celebration of that place in a European context. And I think that depending on where it is in Europe, and we can see this with many of our colleagues who are experiencing some challenges and difficulties in delivery as well, it means something very different to everyone, but it is about showcasing that place in a European context and in that way. And I think if you ask Sinead from the department's perspective, it will have a slightly different meaning, you know.
Interesting for you?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose from the point of view of the department, the first thing to look at was about Ireland's space within Europe and within the EU. So, I mean, the Capital of Culture, ACAN, as we would call it, it's most long-standing, I think, and most high-profile cultural action within the EU sphere. So, I mean, I see that myself. I work and participate in the working group to the Council of Ministry for Culture and see the huge work that goes in, year out, from the member states as they gear up to deliver and to run the competition for the Capital of Culture and the excitement that there was around the announcement of each individual Capital of Culture. So it's that in first instance. So I mean, it was always important for Ireland to participate in that regard. I think then the second thing that I would say is like bringing back into the Capital of Culture in Ireland. I mean, it was really about, I guess, the successful city, whichever it would be, that successful city could achieve the aims of the capital and achieve its own aims as well. And that, you know, department investment in that was very important in that regard too.
Great. And Brendan, if I could ask you, because it's so critical, the role, and I know this from my own time and I've seen it in other cities, the role of civic leaders, yourself in particular as chief executive, in leading these bids effectively. They're often a key lead in the partnership to deliver the designation. Can you talk about why you wanted Galway to be European Capital of Culture?
Thanks, Liz. I suppose slight segue to the previous presentation. Chicago is also one of Galway's sister cities. It's one of 5 sister cities we have in area, which includes Seattle, Boston, and 2 others. And in a forward life with the current submission, our current session, we also managed Shell Sound for a number of years in former life with me, County Council. I would have come to this not as with any huge background or knowledge of arts and culture, but I had developed through my local arty career, I suppose, an acknowledgement and appreciation of what culture can do in terms of placemaking and helping to improve place. And I've equally learned since I came to Galway the importance of culture in that key intangible that's there around attracting FDI from direct investment to Galway. Usually it's infrastructure, or 2 legs, but the third leg is about quality of life, and Galway has that in abundance, and the creative and artistic sector brings that. So I would have come to it about using culture as a catalyst for change in Galway. And you know, Marilyn and Patricia talked through the journey we went on, good and bad, and there was lots of them. There's one very famous photograph here at Galway still. It's the day of Bastille Day, if I remember, when the result was announced. It was impromptu, as Galway does a well gathering of about 3,500 people in Main Guard Street when the result was announced in Castle. Paul Fahy, John Bromley was there, and EMMANUEL is jumping up down for McGrath to welcome the announcement. And look, that's in any way not want to answer your question, Liz, but equally, currently I am the chair, I don't know if it's a good or bad thing at the moment to be, of the City and County Management Association. And the last 3 or 4 weeks of my life have been dominated by the Ukraine crisis. This is probably the first time I've ever come into action. I'm prepared to say something in advance because I've been with refugee-related government challenges right up to the start of this. But last night I eventually did get it down about 10 o'clock. I turned on BBC News. And if I ever needed to be reminded of how important place is, there were a number of stories there of people who were currently fighting to protect their place, to save their homeland. And it was utterly striking and piercing, and it just brought home to me what place means to these people. And equally, I think culture is going to be hugely, hugely important in helping Ireland to deal with the refugee crisis, and part one to play in this in the next number of weeks, months and years. But the European Capital Culture judging team, they wanted to be satisfied that there was both civic and political leadership at the heart of the bid. I think we were away through the first part of the bidding process, eventually the overall bid, because I think we were significantly strong on that. If you read the evaluation reports, there was significant store that the city councillors had agreed to increase rates in the city by 3% to fund Galway City Council's contribution to the capital culture bid. And the last thing I'd say, in answer to your question, I would have reached out to my counterpart of Galway County Council, initially was Martina Maloney and then subsequently Kevin Kelly, to say that this bid needed to be joint bid, it needed to be the city and the county. And I think one of the real successes things we did was that it was a joint bid, that the county and the rural landscape that as much as city landscape is at the heart of it. And I think the legacy which we'll talk about later will be very meaningful for both city and the county. So I'll leave it at that for a moment. Yeah,
just to pick up a bit, I suppose, what you're saying there, Brendan, I think that European Capital of Culture forces us, and it's a really good thing, when we're involved in the creation and designation, it forces us to rethink where our city lies in relationship to Europe, in relationship to Ireland, in relation internationally. Always a small city hanging off the edge of Europe, looking to the west. It's very distinct. There's no other place in the world like Galway. But now the frame of reference for Europe is changed as well because of contemporary events. So I mean, that is one of the functions, I think, of European Capital of Culture, and we might talk about that a little. And Paul, you might talk about it as a producer, maker, as an artistic director for Galway International Arts Festival. What was it for you about the creative potential of European Capital of Culture that drew you to be involved in this?
Opportunity, you know, the producer, you're looking for me from somewhere, but you know, so obviously we're going to be your budgets that are that you know weren't available to us from a year-to-year basis. So I just think, you know, think a little bit bigger than we know could possibly do. But you know, clay has always been hugely important to us. The festival, I mean, we very much celebrate Galway, celebrate location on that, you know, western seaboard and on the edge of Europe. And you know, as well, Galway International Arts Festival has always used both Galway City and County to stage events. And as initially that probably out of necessity, because, you know, cultural infrastructure has never been, you know, a huge thing in Galway historically, and you know, and buildings were transformed to have our serve art in other ways. And that's something we can continue to. We also look to the landscape, we also look to the city streets, we also look to the water in terms of how can we engage, how can we celebrate and showcase where we are. John Gerard is an artist that who we worked a bit past, we commissioned to do a couple of works, some big major work. And when we introduced this out, but we're trying to put, you know, idea that would celebrate Galway, would look at concerns that are temporary. You know, I had this idea of creating in the middle of Connemara, in the middle of a barren landscape, that make people look and view at where they were in a different kind of way, and then engage in something artistically that's very technical. And this is kind of the, you know, book moment, kind of like, you know, come up with your ideas and whatever. And then I thought, you know, John Gerard popped up very quickly as being the obvious artist that we should continue to work with on this, because you know, the digital works he makes are you know, hugely exciting, always constantly pushing boundaries in terms of how he develops technology. He's very interested in play, and he's very interested in ecology and climate concern. And you know, he and I walked a lot around Galway City initially and the Galway County, looking at various different places, and we were both struck with the power of the River Corrib, which flows to the middle of Galway, and it's really one of the fastest flowing rivers in Ireland. And looking at all that energy that possessed, I think, well, you know, how would that be harnessed, and how would that be, you know, going to turn back into a way? And the River Corrib, you know, ran or fueled, if you like, grain mills 100 years ago. So that was kind of our starting point. Anyway, we actually kind of came up with the concept of the Mirror Pavilion, and creating digital works, virtual works worlds that looked at both places, in the Claddagh, Galway City, and in Derrygimla and Connemara. And interestingly, actually, the one in Connemara, which we've just that was a leaf work, which is a single leaf covered figure, who's just this simple choreographic movement, which is meant for the impact of the human world on the non-human world, and looking at the ways that the temperatures, the heat. We've just done that at the Biennale City, actually, on Sydney Harbour. But the piece, at least in terms of its place, so when you went down to Connemara and you went to the bog, which is an extraordinary journey itself, you know, park your car, whatever you did, and you need to walk 2 kilometres through the bog to get this incredible looking piece of work. And you saw the amazing landscape of Connemara, both reflected on mirror, and on the screen itself, you're looking at like a digital presentation, digital version, a digital simulation of that piece with figure forming. But also, interestingly, that site is very historic, in that it was certainly in how it benefited us as a humanity. Anyway, so it was the site of their Code Communications building, which was the first wireless communications from Europe to America. And look at how communications have, you know, helped develop the modern world. And similarly, it was the site where the Callan first transatlantic airplane journey crashing, left America, crash landing kind of on that site. And again, like transport and travel have totally changed our lives, but you also look at the impact they have had on the planet. And then here's this artwork looking at the world around it, looking at this place, and trying to offer commentary, I guess, in a way, of the impact it had and what we to address that. So, like that was there was a big project, like developing kind of. Eventually, John's artwork is developed. It's like computer software. He uses the gaming technology, but it's incredibly time consuming. It's a lot of time. It took a year, effectively, to create each of those two pieces. And there were huge teams around. There was massive research done into things like any kind of environmental impact that we obviously wanted to avoid. We wanted to run the project in a green way. So we used in Galway City, we used electricity from wind farms. So it was an amazing journey for ourselves, exploring both those two locations, learning so much about them, and to create these really impactful artworks that had a big strong message at their heart. So there were big productions, and having Galway 2020 as a partner, or a partner on this, allowed us the freedom to be able to do that. Obviously, you're always going to constrain it, but you're always looking for more. But it did allow us the ability to think big and hopefully impact big.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely it. I think that realisation of the scale of the ambition of artists, and to allow producers such as yourself to help in realisation, and then to allow people to see that work there in Galway. It's so important, but that can only happen with investment. And there is very large scale investment from the department itself of circa 50 million in the end. Can you talk to me about why would the department make that choice? That's the single largest annual investment in an event that the department would make. And I, of course, think it much merited, but you might talk to me about why the department would choose to do that.
Well, look, I mean, from the start, once the government decided that it would participate, and look, I don't think there was ever any serious question that it wouldn't, because I suppose just as everything that has been said so far, including what I said there in terms of the importance of Ireland's participation in such a high-profile event, the investment then, in principle, from the start, and as it moved on to actuality, I mean, it was all about. Obviously, value of money is always a key consideration, and that's underlying everything. But then it was all about investment in the artists, investment in place, in terms of, I suppose, realising the ambition of the cultural programme, helping support that, then fostering the capacity that will be built amongst the artistic community because of it. And as well as that, I guess it's the opportunity to showcase Galway, to give it to the best in terms of what is there to offer in terms of the arts, in terms of the landscape. I guess raising awareness as well of the other aspects of it too, in terms of language, in terms of the other facilities out there. So it was that investment, I guess, in terms of the programme itself, but then looking towards the long term, as well as that in terms of capacity, sustaining that capacity into the future, and building those networks as well, and connections with, whether it be nationally with other artists or other artists even Galway amongst each other, but of course as well out towards EU partners as well. So I guess it was multifaceted in terms of why the department would invest in a capital of culture programme, both for, I guess, the immediate term and looking towards the longer term as well.
Marilyn, you might talk to me a bit about how, once the designation was decided, you were going to go for it, the bid was put together, and then you were awarded the designation. How was the programme, with the input of various organisations and partners from around the city and county, how is it shaped to be of Galway? Because every European capital of culture is different and shapes itself in its own in light of who it is, be it urban, be it rural, be it high density, low density. Can you talk to me a bit about that?
Yeah, the building of the programme was a really exciting time, actually, because it allowed conversations to take place in Galway that really had never taken place before. And also, it actually introduced local partners who, even though we're small in the sector, would have collaborated in that way before. So I think what's unique about the Galway 2020 programme, its ultimate delivery, was that it was a partner-led model. Each partner was responsible for the delivery of their individual projects, and all of those projects have been built through quite a rigorous process in that bid stage. So most projects had an education component. They had European partners or themes, they had European values. They all responded to our themes of language, landscape and migration. And for the most part, projects sat in the city or the county or both. And that placement of urban and rural became a huge conversation and huge challenge, actually, because some partners in Galway City had never actually worked in the county, and some partners in the county had never worked in the city. Despite the fact that, as a trio of arts officers and myself, James and Sharon, that hadn't happened before in that way. So it changed the conversation enormously, for lots of different reasons, good, bad, and otherwise. What did result was a very strong partnership. What did result was a real capacity to deliver, and a very changed capacity to deliver, because, for example, Galway International Arts Festival, Paul alluded to, they were involved in environmental impact assessments on the projects that maybe would have been done to that size and scale before. A number of projects were embedded and built around Creative Europe, Erasmus and other EU schemes. Having the European component and European partners built into design for the projects from the start meant that threading existed in a very coherent way from the beginning, which meant that a number of partners are now part of pan-European networks. Delighted to sit here today and say that 2 of our partners are now this week signing contracts with 2 other capitals of culture of the future, and that legacy of partnership and relationship continues. So I think it's important to reflect on the programme as a very defined period of time. It's the partnerships and the relationships and the knowledge and the capacity that will be long-lasting, and I think felt for years to come in Galway, because it exists. And I think that by ultimately delivering a partner-led model in the way in which we did, and my role ultimately became about facilitating a collective creative vision and not directing it, that gave huge empowerment to partners to do what they knew they could do in the first place, which were deliver these really complex, really beautiful projects, and then to do it in the complexity of COVID, thanks to the 5 levels of restrictions and a serious risk assessment between all 5 levels. It really enhanced the ability and capacity to deliver for years to come for so many people who were involved.
So just to go back for a moment, and maybe I might ask Brendan and Patricia to come in into this as well. So I remember in March 2020 standing looking out a window Dublin, talking to Dublin Dance Festival actually, whose festival is in May, and they were talking to me and they were saying, "Oh Liz, you know, should we cancel?" It's like, I don't really know. Like, when I think now, in the end did. But there was that moment when nobody knew, we didn't know. And yet choice and decisions taken to proceed to deliver European Capital of Culture in face of extraordinary circumstances. And that takes leadership. That takes, you know, courage. You have to take your courage and the courage of your partners, join hands together and move forward. That's what you did. Brendan, you might just talk about that decision to proceed.
Sorry, Liz, I think it was never a question of not proceeding. And just to when you looked at that window in March, our opening ceremony, which was a 7-piece event, 6 of them happened in the county. On Saturday, when we were shooting to launch, we were hit by a red level storm. Yeah. And we had to cancel the opening ceremonies of COVID and tempest that came in a short time. And like everybody, we didn't know initially how things were going to go. And eventually, on Saturday, we had to let some of our staff off. We've done an absolutely amazing job. But I think, and the work that the board put in and the team put in March and April and into May was phenomenal. The support we got from the department, from Sinead and Christine Sisk was exceptional. And we pivoted to very obviously to digital. We were adamant that we had to deliver, and despite all the challenges, we did actually deliver what was in our big book. We delivered it in a very different way. I regret that we never got the opportunity to showcase our own local organisations, you know, in the way we had planned. But I think despite all of the challenges, we delivered something quite unique, and probably I think one of the biggest, if not the big, cultural events anywhere in Europe throughout 2020 and possibly even beyond the boundaries of Europe. So Patricia and Marilyn, I want to go on that.
Yeah, I suppose the risk not to go ahead was too great in terms of our culture partners. They were contractually bound to various artists, and that they had their own plans and commitments made in terms of their programmes of work, and it's absolutely a case of we're going to make it work, but how we're going to do it, nobody was quite sure. It was a really collegiate sense of everybody working together, and I think that held from, say, the beginning phase and the preparation phase and the coming together of all the cultural organisations for the first time in Galway. Because there was a lot of days where we didn't know how we were going to do it, but we knew we had to do it. And full credit to the cultural partners on every level of restrictions. I don't know, John and Paul had to change their dates. I don't know how many times, as did a lot of the other partners as well. But again, huge support from the department in terms of we go back and say we have to change again how we were going to do it. But there was always that we're going to make it work.
Yeah, indeed. It's the extraordinary reason is needed.
But I think it was, you know, just to Trish's point around the how, I mean, you've bear in mind when the 5 levels of restrictions came out, it was just, there were so many copies on the wall in a spare room where we were trying to make the programme work in a way that worked for everybody, because every single cultural partner needed to move dates, times, locations. We were filming in line with the restrictions, and as the restrictions and guidelines were being published, we were filming the next morning and working through the night in some cases to make sure that the right number of crew were in the right place at the right time, the right location. And and pivot is a word I'm never going to use again after today. You know, it's just, as a sector, it's something we do all the time anyway. We're agile and pivot and we do all the buzzwords, but it was a really, really intense period of time, particularly for, as Patricia said, the cultural partners who had so many people relying on them, the producers, the artists, our own team. It was a very significant challenge to do what we did. So I'm really proud of everybody who participated, and belief, that shared belief, along with that shared creative vision that could be done, and that when the world stopped, Galway said we're going to keep going.
Just, I suppose, to add from the perspective of the department, I mean, we were very conscious of the huge amount of work, and in many cases, in most cases, I think over a number of years, by cultural partners, by the team in Galway 2020, in terms of, I guess, devising the concept and then developing their individual projects. And I mean, some of these, we're truly talking, have been developed over probably at least 4 years, maybe anything 1 to 4 years. And some of these, you know, they were days, weeks, short months away from delivery. So that was a big consideration of the department in looking at this. There had been so much investment in terms of time, money, artistic endeavour in that regard as well. And, you know, there was a point as well that there was strong support across the board, you know, from Ministry and Department in terms of supporting the sector at this time and sustaining, you know, the jobs during this period as well. I mean, it was all examined. Like, we went back to the Galway 2020 team a number of times to look at, you know, what level of flexibility could be there to ensure delivery, and the partners were able to respond on each occasion. I think absolute huge credit has to be given to them in that regard, in terms of how many times they had to do that over the entire period, that year of delivery up to the end of April in 2021.
Yeah, and I suppose huge credit to our team that all the preparation put in beforehand, because that's done to us that remained within the team, but also in terms of the cultural partners. So it's great to see their work not been lost as well in terms of the efforts they put in.
Yeah, and I think we have to say as well, too, there was an extraordinary commitment by government, by the department, by the minister, to our country as a cultural country, as a country where the art and artists are important. That has been consistently demonstrated by sustained level of investment in Galway 2020, but also in all of the infrastructure. It's vitally important. I remember I wasn't involved in Cork 2005, so I'm sorry about all the remembrances, but I do remember post Cork 2005 and 2008 when there was a crash. There was a moment, and it was about holding on tight to legacy and holding on tight to the infrastructure that was in place within Cork. And at the time, you'll have already seen some of those legacies here today, in that, not directly at Cork 2005, but the Guxman, and that opened just around that time. The extraordinary work they continue to do now, a sick entity. So just as you move to look towards that legacy and what legacy looks like, it'll look like something different for each of you, from each of your perspectives. So it might be good to think about that and to think about the steps you're taking to preserve, grow and expand on that legacy. I think, Brenda, I'd be very interested to hear what you think of as a legacy of 2020 and where it is going into the future in the context of your role as Chief Executive.
I suppose I took myself off mute. Firstly, the infrastructure was never part of the bid book, but development infrastructure is always hugely important. And there will be a programme of cultural infrastructure development in Galway over the next decade, which will ultimately be part of the legacy. That in a number of cases would be partnerships between a number of state agencies, including Galway City Council, and they're being worked through in various ways. And the City Council will have a huge important role along with County Council in the legacy, because the city is, you know, amongst the biggest supporters of the arts community in Galway. The whole placemaking piece is hugely important. We currently have drafted our city development plan of public consultation. There's a whole chapter in that which deals with the heritage placemaking and urban design, and it's specifically recognised. We have parallel public relevant strategy that we adopted a number of years ago. And the public relevant strategy is, you know, equally looked at how we create, in physical sense, new spaces and places where culture and where the arts can be shown into the future. And that's very much at the heart of what we do. We're working on a legacy piece. And the City Council will be very much at the heart of that. That will focus on a number of areas, and Marilyn just shared a little bit at a high level with you. And the 2020 programme and the project is not the end, it's the beginning, quite frankly. And it's the beginning of focusing on some of the key things that we identified. And there's been a huge debrief as part of the legacy piece. Marilyn and some of our other colleagues before have engaged in extensive sessions with all of the parts. What worked, what didn't, what do we need to work on in relation to legacy. So it's about audience development, it's about developing the capacity of the sector. The European piece is going to be huge at that. Marilyn referred to this. I remember the very first meeting we had back, we were doing the bid, and we had a meeting below McGrath down Wood Lane. And that day we had invited 38 arts organisations in the city, 32 third development was genuine, apologies 6. And the first comment we got, this is actually the first time we've all been in the same room together. And that spawned a lot of, as Marilyn has alluded to earlier, cross-organisation, cooperation, collaboration during, not during the bid, but during delivery. That is definitely going to continue. And we have quite a number, I think, of really exciting, tangible and really meaningful projects that are going to emerge and be out over the next number of months where we start building that legacy. So happy to leave it there for Liz and the colleagues take over.
Great to know, Patricia or Marilyn, if you want to come in that.
Yes, I suppose it goes to the investment was in the arts and the cultural organisations. It's for to go 2020, but as Brendan says, there will be investment in infrastructure. But it'd be interesting to see what is needed now in terms of the last 2 years, how places are used, what type of infrastructure will be required. I think there'll be an interesting discovery as we move along that.
I think a huge part of the legacy has been the people involved in the connections, so partnerships that have emerged locally, nationally, and across Europe. They need to be facilitated and very much part of the monitoring and evaluation, which was a very extensive monitoring and evaluation, had a number of outcomes and learnings. So the legacy will build on those outcomes and learnings. Indeed, the project faced many challenges over the years. So really it's about harnessing the learning from all of that and ensuring that a very comprehensive programme can be put in place that best supports artists and cultural organisations, not just in Galway, but that learning exists for Ireland actually on a much wider scale. And also that hybrid delivery in the way in which we ultimately delivered the programme has become a model for their capitals of culture in terms of future-proofing from a sustainability perspective as well. So I think that the legacies are quite layered. There's some very direct legacies and some very indirect legacies. And really what we're looking at now is framing all of those in something clear and comprehensive that will benefit the sector for a very long time.
Yeah, and I suppose the monitoring evaluation report will stand both nationally as well in terms of the evidence in terms of the absolute requirement to invest in culture. And I suppose we're a unique capital of culture in that the numbers were taken away in terms of visitors and what it drew in terms of visitors, and the investment was done because it's very important to invest into the creative and cultural sector as an essential part of our daily lives, really.
And actually, I think that's a really important point that Patricia's just made, because it really shifted the conversation. This was not about tourism or economics at the end of the day. This was about cultural value. And that decision to proceed into great unknown was about cultural value and value in art and in placemaking. And that's what it became about at the end of the day. And that's to me what European Capital of Culture is.
But it is really interesting to think about it, because sometimes one of the criticisms levelled at European Capital of Culture is that they are very oriented towards the economic and return on that scale, and return of the tourism scale, and also the value of brand to a city and to a place. But actually, I think in just the experience of recent times, years, but also more broadly, our shared experience has shown us actually that culture, artists, communities, they're something that's deeply cherished and valued in our country as it is internationally. And I think your success, the way your programme engaged, is a demonstration of that. And I think your evaluation demonstrates that, although it's 2022. You know, one doesn't know the legacy for like 10, 15, 20 years, actually. Just in terms of your work, Paul, Galway International Arts Festival has always been an international arts festival. You have worked during programmes, you have commissioned work that has gone international. But how do you think the experience of being such a central part of the programme of European Capital of Culture has impacted on the festival into the future and how you approach your work? Can you hear? You're unmutable, I think. Now you're gesturing at me, but I can't hear you. Okay, I just... No joy. Okay, that's not going to work. Does anybody want to hazard a guess what Paul's answer might be?
I think I don't know if Ben can... I think is Paul on our side?
No, I don't think so. Oh, there we go. You're here.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute, getting a message I couldn't do, but your degree of recognition is resolved, so thank you very much. So again, you know, there were some main conversations during the planning and running of Galway 2020, and there was amazing kind of turnaround. They had to respond to a situation that the world was kind of dealing with. There were some amazing learnings. I also there was some great, great in terms of, we're interested to hear Brendan say there about the 32 Galway arts organisations being in that one room and do it that day and not having been together previously or whatever. I think genuinely it's been it's like a renewed admiration and respect amongst colleagues in Galway as well in terms of what we're doing, and people learned a lot more about each other doing that. And that's, so we actually had some interesting conversations with some of those organisations for future projects, some of which manifest in this coming July, that we had normally kind of had previously. So that's an exciting prospect. Also, is that just kind of the legacy of whatever I said earlier on, like we're currently touring the pavilion to Sydney, and I really hope that, that the pavilion gets to goes quite further and be in LA, and I really hope that it'll have a future life. But also, like what Galway 2020 always did, what big cultural events always do, they turned spot spotlight on a place, on the artist, on an organisation. And there were many more spotlights turned on Galway because of Galway 2020. And out of, have come some very big conversations, and I'm sure some more will come, because you say, Liz, it does take a while for the legacy to properly be developed. It does take a number of years. But I do hope and I'm confident that it'll open up other avenues for other, future international collaborations and commissions. From my point of view as the artistic director of the International Arts Festival. So it was clearly, the last couple of years have been massively challenging for everybody on so many different kind of levels. And I'm Marilyn, I never use the word split after today, we're significant. We always can pride ourselves in being, be flexible people and flexible organisations, but we did all have to pivot into kind of different and worlds. But I think that has been great learning from that experience. And there's that collective of every single time, you thought you're at the top of the mountain, you realise, another cloud would lift and there's another few hundred metres or another 2 months to kind of go. So I think it's made us sharper and more resilient to taking on future projects.
Okay, well, I think we're just coming to the end. So I have one final question, two-part question for each of you. Firstly, would you do it again? And what will you remember? What's your memory that you'll take away with you from Galway 2020? Brendan, if I'd ask you. I think we're having a mute problem again, and I don't know.
Sorry, that was my fault. Totally will do it again. In project, we got many things right. With some things wrong, we know what we got wrong. But we did bring the cultural partners and the artistic community largely together in Galway. We did satisfy every single person, but we did satisfy a hell of a lot of people. I use the political phrase, we have some done, we have a hell of a lot more to do, and we're happy to do it. We value and appreciate even more what culture does contribute to our city. It's reinforced its importance. It is a tool for transformation, it is a tool for change. It's hugely important by everything in our economic life, in tourism, but very much in our social life. 25% of the population currently hail from outside the island of Ireland. That's going to grow now with our Ukrainian friends becoming as an enrichment there. If we've finally learned, I think we've learned about the Galway context of just local placemaking, but global placemaking and a role in a European context. And it has, the bid prompted us to reach out and become a UNESCO City of Film. We became Ireland's first European green leaf city. We became a European region of gastronomy. It brought the city and the county close together. It brought local authorities and the state agencies in the region closer together, and definitely we're doing. And my very last comment, I deliberately used the image behind me, the cannons that are in the back there, which are outside City Hall, from the Crimean War, and that's just was an ongoing reminder of what the people out there are facing as we speak. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. And Marilyn?
I probably would do it again, to be honest, because it's such a magnificent project in lots of ways. Extremely challenging. I think we can't lose sight of the challenges. They are remarkable, but the learning in terms of embracing challenges and turning challenges into opportunities is something that I learned I had to do, I had no choice. In terms of the lasting memory, outside of the things I'd rather forget, one of the great memories for me, and I think Brendan did another a few minutes ago, was the fire tour in the county. Bearing in mind I come from a county, and those 6 magnificent nights across towns and villages of the county, and watching the explosion fireworks, the community cast who had been rehearsing 6 months, all volunteers, all the artists in each of those 6 locations. And I remember actually, I think Spiddle and Tuam and Clifton and Ballinasloe, looking back and just seeing the face of the people, the public. And in each of those faces, it's the faces that stay with me forever. The faces of the community cast as they drummed and led everybody to the streets to each of the locations. The faces of pride of the volunteers, faces of the musicians who performed on each of those nights, and the faces of the public, people who turned up in their thousands in small towns and large events that had never been done before. And the face of the banners and the guards going, God, they pulled it off. They actually did this safely and beautifully. And our team, faces of our teams on those nights, they will stay with me forever. And I will say as well, Guitar and I walked across the bridge the morning that Mirror Pavilion was being built, and it wasn't the event, it was the scaffolding. And just watching the scaffolding going up, and the lines of Seamus Heaney's poem came into my head, and just thought, that's the first physical thing in COVID in the city, and it was that memory will stay with me forever.
Patricia, Sinead?
Yes, absolutely. But Sinead wants to give me 15 minutes. We'll go at it again. Yeah, it is. It's
He's scared, then about the coach.
But it is one of those things you start and you're kind of, what on earth am I after doing now? But yes, to see up of it, to see that level of investment going into, as you rightly said, the first time ever going into that sector, and just hope that it will continue, because there was lots of ups and downs, not just in terms of developing your own skills, but even in terms of your own personal growth, in terms of how you deal with things and the connections you make, and the returns it will have to the city and the county. And I suppose in terms of memories, it would have to be in September 2019 in Air Square when we launched the programme, and the anticipation, wait and see what was going to happen, and then the excitement with the explosion of colour, with families and children and everybody just out enjoying, and we had a fabulous day.
Great. And Nathan, I'm going to actually these to be quick because I can really pull the stage.
That's all right. Would I do it again? Yes, I'm older and wiser and all the rest, so I know I'm getting myself in now. But look, absolutely. I mean, it's been a challenging experience at times, but it has been fantastic. We have worked with fantastic people in Galway, really dedicated people, and that's one reason. I think the other reason I would do it again is there were so many wonderful projects that just didn't get to see the light of day the way they should have, which lead me into my memorable moment. It was the weekend. It was early September, I think, and I went down to Galway and I saw about Bird Pavilion and Drood in Cool Park, and talk about like maximising place and just highlighting place. There were two fantastic productions to see that really just drew on the places, and it was wonderful to actually see it because it was exactly that. I think it was the first time that something could be physically seen, some projects from Galway 2020 could be physically experienced. So that's it.
And Paul?
Quickly, I think it was Martin that said, people wonder what you said and what you did, will remember how they made you feel. And I think so many things happened during 2020 did just give an overwhelming feeling of just of amazement and of kind of triumph for the adversity of what everybody was trying to work through. And I suppose personally, I always know audiences engage with the arts, and that connection, that fusion is what kind of inspires me all the time. So seeing people's faces reacting to things is always wonderful. And to see the Pavilion as a gleaming beacon of hope really seems to offer nourishment to the soul, and especially when we need it most. And we'll do it again.
Well, look, I'd like to thank the panel so much. I'd also like to especially thank Paul Fahy, who's no sight soul, for chairing this because he couldn't be here today. So thank Paul. And thank you all so much as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would they do it again? Of course they'd do it again, and the sooner the better. Now, I would thank you very much to Liz, thank you to Marilyn, and to Patricia, and to Sinead, and remote to Paul and Brandon. And with great apologies to Marilyn, we're going to now pivot panel. It's the first time we've done that. Now, some people will be rushing off now because there are two other things going on. There's the open conversation in the studio gallery, and there's the live chat with EMMANUEL Pratt in Carl College. But wherever you're going, we keep your mind 4:15, because we have a special conference reflection then by Philly Speaks and Davie Philip. I think that is going to be unique, and we absolutely want to see it. So if we pivot our panel, can I introduce to you now Davie Philip, going to talk about artist-led regeneration, which I'm always fascinated to hear how artists think. So Davie will introduce the panel to you.
Thank you. So thanks for being here. Hopefully there's going to be a huge influx of people coming in now. We have an interesting small session now from Organised Architecture, community-led placemaking as civic partnership, models of artist-led regeneration. So I've got a bit interest in this. I live in community. I'm based down in Cloughjordan, but an artist enclave down there, and really creative placemaking is something that we're really keen on. I'm going to introduce Tom O'Donnell, though, from SOA Architects. Can we get him onto the main screen, or? He's behind me. There you are. So, Tom, will you set the context of what we're in here?
Great. Thanks very much, Davie. So my name is Tom O'Donnell. I'm the Founding Director of Self-Organised Architecture. So I just want to very briefly introduce the idea of community-led placemaking as civic partnership. I first heard this phrase civic partnership from Stephen Hill in the context of the Community Land Trust, where he made the point that a community land trust can enable a transformative process to achieve something that would otherwise not have been possible, and does this by bringing together local citizens, civil society, local authorities to enact changes which are to the mutual benefit of all parties. So we in SOA, in our work to develop the community land trust for the Irish context, have come across numerous examples in the UK, Europe and Ireland of an artist-led or artist-instigated process for engaging meaningfully with all voices to develop a genuine civic partnership in creative placemaking. This process often works on a number of levels and addresses social, ecological, cultural and economic issues, as well as physical realities of place. This holistic idea of a social ecology is reflected in the Death Site project initiated by our panelist Ailbhe Cunningham and our colleague Aoife Desmond, where temporary structures and meanwhile uses are an invitation to begin the process of questioning. Our work with European Community Land Trust led us to Dumfries, and by our partners South Scotland Community Housing, we discovered the work of the Stove project and our panelist Matt Baker. They began a process of reimagining, reclaiming and revitalising with the question, what is the purpose of our town centre? The answers were not pre-formulated. Instead, they grew out of the different events, projects and conversations over 5 years of development. And the Stowe project led to the ambitious mid-steeple court project in Dumfries, a project we know is already installed by local authorities from Ireland. So a central question for us in SOA in this discussion is how do we ask the right questions and ensure the outcome is a community-led process? Are all voices included? How do we bring in further stakeholders? How do we include local authority in the process? Our panelists Rosie Lynch and Workhouse Union have pioneered participatory spatial strategies practice in Ireland. In 2017, Trust Productions and Workhouse Union project Reach Out the Green asked the question, how do we inhabit our small towns? And the Nimble Spaces Inclusive Neighbourhoods project is community-led housing and community land trust that emerged from a long and innovative process of questioning and listening. So the sense we get is that community-led placemaking as civic partnership is about more than tackling vacancy or dereliction or affordable housing per se. It's also about a process of civic renewal, of development aimed at common good. It seems to us it's a process that begins with questions, a process that opens the channel for creative action to empower all participating voices. So thank you. I'll pass you back to Davie now. I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Tom. And Tom was planning to be here. Unfortunately, he could travel. So our short session today, we're going to hear some examples of creative placemaking, of artists and creatives involved in regeneration and the transformation of our places. With three voices, Matt Baker, Rosie Lynch and Ailbhe Cunningham. I'm going to invite them up here, introduce them properly, hear 6 or 7 minutes from each of them, and get into a short conversation before we hear some closing remarks. So that's our objective today. So our first presenter is Matt Baker. He's an artist and founder of the Stove Network in Dumfries. Matt led the art strategy for the Gorbals in Glasgow, the Regeneration project there from 1999 to 2005. The Stove Network that he founded in Dumfries is a social enterprise, working in partnership with the local community, providing regular employment for now 40 people from the creative sector. And Stove is the only, or was the only community development trust that is actually run by artists in Britain, and have won a Scottish Regeneration Award for their work. So a big Irish welcome for Matt Baker.
Okay, we got slides. Aha, we have slides. Okay. Hello, and thank you very much for having me. I had to move. I've really felt welcomed in Ireland and made some new pals already, so thank you very much for having me. I'm absolutely terrified of Davie on the timing thing, so I've written this down, so you're going to have to listen to me read, I'm afraid. So it's important to say where we are. We're the main town in a rural region. Dumfries has 40,000 inhabitants. This is our high street in 2014. We're a classic club town. In the 70s and 80s, we were considered big enough for the national chains to move in and displace our independence and diversity of our town centre. Then, of course, out-of-town shopping, internet and COVID has basically cleared our high street. The other thing to remember here is that all that you can see on the up floors are empty. We only actually have one long-term resident left on our high street in Dumfries. In 2011, a group of local artists started a project called Stove, and the mission was simply to use creativity as a way to have a conversation about the nature of the town. Some example projects up there on the top left, a simple social media project about what buildings would say, and then to the right, drawing a new town on the square with passers-by, and down below a new town charter that was crowdsourced with local groups and presented at a town festival. So Stove took over a 3-storey former shop on Main Square, and we operate this as a community cafe, production space, and it serves as headquarters for community action in town. 4 years of project conversation and learning led to us putting forward a proposal for a means of growing a new kind of town centre, the one we'd heard about in the conversations we'd had. The idea was it was a town centre that was based on a diverse offer, and that prioritised bringing people back to live in the town centre, and starting with a single block and moving on from there. The idea was called Mid-Steeple Quarter, based on the idea that as a community, we'd buy back a section of our high street using community empowerment legislation we have in Scotland, developing ourselves. People might be familiar with the idea that in Scotland, communities are buying back islands and shooting estates of absentee landlords. We have absentee landlords in our high street, the pension funds and the like own buildings. We formed a new community benefit society to run the project. This is the launch. You'll see that kind of like activist campaign feel, and those are our local politicians down at the bottom left there when we talk about civic partnerships later. This is the Mid-Steeple Quarter area that we are taking over. And in terms of looking at that, you think you see the length of buildings that are on the high street, a very long footprint. So basically, by taking over those buildings on the high street, we would have control over about 2/3 of that block. This is the visualisation of the plan, which will create 66 new two-bedroom flats. The flats for rent, owned by the community, bringing, we hope, something like 200 people to live in the town centre. This is where we are now with project. We've got 5 out of the 8 properties in community ownership, and we're just about to start on site this month with a 7 million redevelopment of 7 new flats for rent and a 350 square metre creative enterprise space. Where are we? There. Okay, so alongside this work, the SOVE has also developed many other creative placemaking projects. A couple of examples here. This is the Nithred River Festival, which celebrates the role of river in the town. This is our Norwegian Story, an 18-month heritage project looking at the relationship between Dumfries and Norway in the Second World War. The Norwegian army in exile was based in Dumfries, and our population was 20% Norwegian. We basically had literally no idea what we were to start with. We now understand ourselves as a facilitator of a community-led plan, a hub for the creative sector, and we call that combination creative placemaking. It's basically a virtuous circle that the community plan with creates work for artists, which leads to projects, which leads to more work for artists. In April 2020, we published a report into creative placemaking in our region, proposing a network of community organisations with the cultural infrastructure woven in across the region. And during COVID, we were part of designing Scottish Government's Culture Collective initiative, which places creative freelancers in community settings to give voice to underrepresented groups. That project has 26 regional projects running currently and just received continuation funding. We are running one of the Culture Collective projects in our region, which pilots the idea of the creative placemaking network we're talking about. We're working in 5 different towns. Each of this, we're supporting a community group in each of those places to host 2 creative practitioners for a year, was a year now more, and we have a regional partners group of arts organisations that support that work, and a strategic partnership of enterprise agencies, local authority, etc. So just to leave you with this, in the light of COVID, Scotland is looking very deeply at the way that culture can be a tool for delivering a well-being economy, and the focus really is on deeply looking at participation in culture rather than consumption of culture. So that's where we are just now. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. We're going to come closer to home now. I'm going to invite Rosie Lynch to give some insights from Callan. Rosie is the Creative Director of Workhouse Union, who work collaboratively to develop projects examining housing, civic infrastructure and commons. In 2021, we delivered Town Ecology in partnership with Kilkenny Leader Partnership and Kilkenny County Council across 3 rural projects. Rosie is also a member of the team behind Nimble Spaces. 3 inclusive neighbourhoods in Callan are being developed, 26 new homes by O'Cullon Housing Alliance, Tua Housing and a new community land trust. Rosie Lynch.
Wait, I don't need that. So lovely to be here in Renewal today. Just to introduce our work, for the past 12 years, I've been working. Is my this working? Green, yeah. Sorry, this.
You probably got that right.
Yeah, just that. Yeah. So for the past 12 years, I've been working out of the context of Callan, a small town in County Kilkenny. A town for complex reasons with its strong roots in community development, heritage, generosity and intimacy of architectural scale, and real need for town revitalisation has supported a considerable flourishing of artistic activity and practice over the past 22 years. With KEYNOTE Arts Centre, a radical act of inclusion and our mothership to us all. Patrick Lydon, a town champion, trailblazer, mentor and collaborator, has supported our solid foundations, and in turn the diverse artistic and cultural community has engaged with and accompanied significant community-led town centre renewal and various place-specific projects. Within the complex ecology of creative practice in Callan, Workhouse Union has grown to an organisation supporting and initiating co-design, community engagement and placemaking. And central to our work is the theme of civic partnership. Our work often emerges over many years, and tempo, focus and core of our programme and activities shift and weave required, like an invisible relay button between a spectrum of community partnership, individuals, local authority, NGOs, artists, architects, activists and creative organisations like here at Visual. We've been really lucky to be able to sort of engage with Visual a lot over the last kind of year. They're fantastic resource and support. Explicit in our work is clear focus that I'm going to call here today deliberate action. We try hard to make sure that we're responding to and engaging with wider contexts at play, whether that's a submission to a local area plan or a county city development plan, or a need for a community to have a specific plan visualised for them to work towards funding. So we're always really focusing and being very aware of the needs of people and places we work with. There is a tension at play across our work, and I say this resonates with many of us here today. A tension between shovel-ready, funding, deadline-focused process with very kind of bureaucratic procurement procedures and tick-box consultation processes on one hand, and on the other hand, coming from the creative field, an arts outcome has a value in an art situation, perhaps little value or meaning to a community context. Obviously, this is a very binary positions I'm setting out. And another tension is the clarity needed for a client, commissioner and funder, and the openness inherent in an art-led approach. And within these tensions, our work tries to find its moral compass, navigating divergent approaches, expectations, languages, and horizons. Our home at Callan Workhouse is a constant reminder of the spatial injustice and how the built environment does act as enclosure. And it is through this historical lens and within this building we have been on a journey to think, act, and collaborate on how better to support people in planning processes. We worked alongside Camp Callan, a disability organisation, on the Nimble Space project for the last 9 years. The project began as a participatory design process exploring what home means. And with LID Architects, we now have planning permission for 25 houses on 3 sites. And we're working now with O'Coolon Housing Alliance to bring these inclusive neighbourhoods to construction. And this is where we've met SOA and Davie through the whole kind of wider community-led housing journey, and we're just really delighted that SOA are so busy strengthening our wider network in this area. The Bridge project galvanised many creative community interests around the future of Bridge Street, and we collectively intervened into a brief moment of the 800-year life cycle of this medieval street, with Fenley's as an anchor and Dayton Houlihan's care for restoration of both the built fabric and enterprise spirit of the building in the centre of Bridge Street. Now, 6 years later, Bridge Street has received significant funding on many levels, and this kind of phase of the project has been led by the County Council, so really kind of galvanising on that initial community and artist-led approach. Many of our projects engage with young people's experience and agency in shaping and engaging with the world around them. And through our work with the County Council roads engineer Tola Hoff, Spanish architects Hood Praxis, and a group of young skaters in the city, we learned really the true value of quality co-design. And the process of the city engineer working collaboratively with a group of skaters on all design elements of the skate park is still present in the ongoing maintenance and management of the park, which opened in May 2021. And I'm going to wrap up just speaking about town ecologies, which is the current project we're working on. It's funded by the Arts Council to support emerging architecture and design practices to expand their experience of co-design and community engagement skills. And last summer, 3 young practices worked with active community-led in active community-led contexts, were mentored by Kilkenny County Council, Kilkenny Partnership. I have the wrong date, it's actually 2021. So Kate Driffin and Andrea Doyle led a community-led mapping process in the town of Ballyraggett. Islander architects worked in the village of Dunmagan on a co-designed Magic Garden, creating one little game called Local Lines. And in Blackheath Amphitheatre, on certain future engaged in storytelling design interventions into this incredible amphitheatre that is run by the local community. In 2022, we're delighted to be heading into a second round of town ecology, again supported by the Arts Council in partnership with our local authority and leader. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rosie. So we're going to go from Callan to Cork now. I'm here a little from Ailbhe Cunningham. Ailbhe is an architect, a printmaker and a photographer, and she really recognises the necessity to nurture cross-disciplinary collaboration in order to develop resilient, sustainable urban landscapes. And the test site, the project she's co-created with Aoife Desmond, who's here today, is an ongoing exploration of collaborative-based learning. So Ailbhe, would you like to give us some insight?
Thank you. So I think the slides, just wait a moment for them to pop up. Okay, so I'll introduce the project. As Davie has mentioned, Test Site is a project co-created with artist, performer and filmmaker Aoife Desmond. So immediately just introduce that I'm an architect. Aoife, coming from her artistic background, we immediately discovered this need, a requirement for collaboration, and I suppose an energy to bring that through our practice in delivering this project. I'll give you the context again. I think there seems to be an issue with the changeover of slides, but our approach is based in Cork City. Cork Key, right in the city centre, if anybody is familiar with the streets, Patrick Street and Grand Parade, they sweep a little north to reach the river. Curls Key is a little island site, which we discovered all living in our subconscious, in our history, in our memory of place, but very much overlooked or currently forgotten. So we all congregated in 2020 for Ailbhe Desmond's Art Environment Making course. Of course, Ailbhe actually invited a very generous open call for artists to congregate and educate, learn together to develop our practices, to find a means to develop our individual points of view, but actually to develop them in a collaborative manner. During that very short, what was 6-week process, we actually discovered huge synergies across our varying disciplines. So we looked at a place, at Curls Quay, which I believe is incoming, and we looked through the lenses of photography, filmmaking, performance, writing, architecture in my instance, and a general understanding and ambition to be activists within our environment. So a word that I repeatedly return to when discussing this idea of civic partnership is one of catalyst. We, in engaging through Ailbhe's open call, we engaged in a process which became catalyst for a much longer collaboration, test site, a project becoming a catalyst to create civic partnerships. So we engaged, both Ailbhe and I, initially in a creative partnership. This partnership then developed very diversely with the mentorship of Rosie Lynch and with a team of an educator and artist called Duneen, and Mary Kelleher, an urban planning and ecologist, focuses in her background. So what has now appeared on screen is the result of the zine that was produced as part of that initial 6-week process. And the reason that I include the zine, actually in itself, a very soft, a very simple DIY production, the end result of the 6-week course, becoming a communication tool, becoming a catalyst for a temporary action. So the zine here pasted on hoarding of the physical place that we had investigated remotely, this place, Curls Quay. That same zine becoming a communication tool, in addition, a place at the farmers' market that we occupy for a single Saturday to engage with the local stakeholders, again becoming means for communication. A very simple A4 printed document becoming the catalyst for what has so far been a 2-year engagement process. With the times that emerged, so I mentioned this current 2-year-long project began in 2020. Again, the emergence through times of COVID and restrictions. We saw great advantage in reimagining this idea of restriction, the importance of place, and how the idea of the metal collaboration could actually lead to this long-term process. So with, again, support of the Arts Council and very much collaboration with the City Council, their support and backing enabling this, Ailbhe created a series of site-responsive performances. She developed a 16mm film specific to the site, and we created a series of physical installations, so a pavilion, a quilfiog, and native woodlands. So really looking at 3 themes here: art and architecture, looking at biodiversity, urban planning, and architectural heritage. How do we install something that becomes the catalyst for engagement, that becomes the catalyst for empowering civic partnership or creating it? So we carried out a series of engagement events and very much saw, again, I suppose, to return to ideas, lessons learned, and themes that came through, this idea of diversity. All of us coming very much from an arts background, how do we start to communicate to the wider civic community through, in this instance, a seminar series, workshops, so in this instance, very much becoming active in making, in transforming site, in planting a site with Nina Gould, here installing quilfiog, but also provide background and education to it. Performance series to accompany the seminar discussions, a film screening in which we collaborated with Ailbhe for Dublin in a series of screenings of 16mm experimental films that very much considered culture, heritage and place. A series of walking tours, so retracing the same steps but from different points of view, overlaying narratives from different perspectives, retracing the same physical place but understanding it through varying lenses. So again, this idea of hoarding, once again received as an obstacle, came a point of interaction, installing a series of public inspiration panels, using the visual graphics that very skillfully put together a whole suite of visual tools for us by Deirdre Breen. So very much, again, trying to use these visuals as a prompt, as a catalyst for further engagement. Workshops, again, here in orienteering, an orienteering event, chair-making workshops, heritage collage making workshops, and with Rosie, engagement with the draft development plan. So really looking at these various ways in which the city was merging. Community programming, so an outreach project that Stevie G is run with a youth group in the city, giving them a place to participate and own, to activate. Must add then, just concludes the long-term impacts. These are simple but physical example of how this temporary project is now emerging and taking physical root within the city as a whole. These trees, which are a temporary installation to engage people in the city, have now found permanent home in the city itself. Funding and support is without doubt the most crucial element that these civic partnerships can be sustained. The temporary project was supported by this wide variety of stakeholders, be that financially or through collaboration. I would just really like to conclude with that point that in order for projects like this to be sustained and developed and nurtured, this support must be found and continued. Thank you.
Brilliant, Ailbhe. Thank you, Rosie. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Tom. We bring Tom into our panel behind us because I'm going to ask a few questions. So we've got maybe just over 10 minutes to go a little deeper in conversation. Maybe to start, this panel, we're really looking at civic partnership, public civic partnership in creative and community-led processes. What might that look like? So maybe I'll start with you, Tom. What does a civic partnership mean, and how can we ensure it?
Well, I guess for us, in our work so far, we've been working with the community land trust structure, which is a kind of an embodiment of civic partnership, both in the way that the project gets instigated, but also in the long-term life of projects. So it's not really a community land trust project isn't really a project that's just about urban renewal or something like that. It's a bottom-up process that involves the wider community. And its governance structures are set up such that in the long term, the stakeholders in the project are going to be spread across the residents or the local people who are involved in the project, civil society, and local authorities. So the board structure is divided up into three sections, and that's to sort of balance the interests of the residents against the long-term interest of the community land trust. So it really is in its structure a kind of model of civic partnership.
Thanks, Tom. Matt, in Scotland, how does it take shape? How does it look, civic partnership, especially in the sort of creative arts-led process or community-led processes?
Yeah, I'll come to that in a slightly different way to Tom. Well, I agree with everything he's saying. And it's important to say what I'm talking about now is something with benefit of hindsight rather than what plan in the first instance. But in the nature of any partnership, it's like who's doing what and what are the roles, and understanding and respecting those roles. And the community and creative approach and role is one that actually not know a fixed outcome. You know, it's about going on a journey of discovery, and how do you then connect that to a bureaucracy and infrastructure that requires those outcomes to be defined in order to resource itself. So, and in my experience, that's been through a building of trust with a few key individuals that have then allowed us to a structure of speaking and language, which the language from the bureaucratic side is developed in a way that they know that that's going to be okay for them, and it can be shared with the creative community side in a way that's all right with them. And then the key people are then keeping their relative teams on side with the way that language continues to be communicated, and that turns into really innovative things like one of the key people in our council. There are certain bits of money that are available to use in a council situation. One of which, in our situation, was the council tax second hubs, and seeing what we were doing, a council officer put forward an idea that that second home council tax could be used for supporting towns and delivery projects, which we were then able to bid into. So that I'll leave it there.
I can imagine when you said there that a lot of the projects in the sort of creative-led or community-led don't have predefined outcomes. Or going in, working with Merdens, looking to explore. I can imagine, we heard in earlier sessions, the difficulty of procurement or the bureaucracy or over-bureaucratizing. Without, say, key performance indicators, I mean, what's the relationship like with your arts councils or your funders that are supporting initiatives?
Yeah, we work with very mixed. We actually have very little arts money in what we're doing. We're a social enterprise in the way that we're working, so we're generating exploratory money for ourselves in the way that we're functioning, bringing community development money. So the way that relationship goes, I think the creative folk need to keep leading. It's about innovation, and then to be seen as being part of the evolving conversation about what it's all about. So they need to be out there advocating in the policy environment at the same level as the folk from the bureaucratic side of things, so that you actually work. And then I think somehow magically that circle can get squared through the good offices of a few people who are trusting that process. People get really hidebound by this idea of like what are the funding outcomes and all the rest. I think there are always ways around that if that human trust can come into it, which is about the wider idea of how we actually think about infiltrating that bureaucracy and changing that bureaucracy as part of the outcome that we're looking for, which is the well-being economy that we're looking for.
Brilliant. Rosie, you mentioned in your short presentation there working with local development companies, working with local authorities. What is healthy civic partnership from workers' unions perspective?
I mean, I suppose I have, you know, the kind of concept of civic partnership in our work is very much a lived experience. So it's not theoretical for us. I think it's something we learned, and certainly, as I kind of set out in short presentation, we came in this very rich cultural college in Callan and sort of already had a bit of a head start, especially in the relationships that other kind of community development and creative practice in Callan had with local authority and our local leader company. Our local leader company have really kind of come along a process of experimentation with us, and, you know, sort of stage now where the Town College project, which is really has a very focused art outcome, but we're able to collaborate and see what it needs from a local authority, local partnership, and then find the kind of common project together. So we're at this real stage, and that's with Ted Cruz, an architect from Guatemala working in the US. He talks about the need for artists, architects, activists to engage in the, you know, really engage in the bottom up, top down, and not outside. And I think that's kind of how we have reapproached things. We're not into the binary, we're not into the us and them, creative practitioners being other. It's very much as citizens, as people of living in place, being involved in those processes that are difficult, but I think, you know, most processes are difficult. But just to, yeah, so it's very, very much a lived experience, and I think of learning, and at the beginning, the first session, Alison Harvey talked about how, you know, the ego can't be in collaboration. I think there's a healthy ego that can be in collaboration. I think but certainly, you know, I've learnt over the last 12 years working talent, you know, often you have to step out and realise that other people are better at carrying part of the project. So for instance, the Bridge Street project, we'd have been very active with lots of other people, Silent Productions, Traffic Productions, Studio We, Fenley. You know, when I say we in Canada, a huge, broad spectrum of practitioners, Workhouse Union is only one. And we were able to bring the process with Art Council funding, and with bits of County Council and leader funding, but then we knew we needed to step out, and County Council were able to step in with, you know, in the region of 1.4 million, you know, and it's about knowing, you know, I think it's that idea, respecting, trusting that civic partnership, knowing when to step in, step out, and I think often what happens in an arts kind of when the arts is leading, that, you know, there's often tension around the sort of final product and who owns it. But I mean, I think, you know, that's just something we learned, and the ego's been hurt a long way.
Well, in some ways, we need to transcend our own ego. We have to transcend our institutional egos. Yeah. If we're going to work, as you've described, in ecosystems where there might be many organisations and entities collaborating with support of a local authority or a local development company, we have to work in a different way, and we can't be getting caught up in our own needs. In platform cooperatives, which I'm really interested in to say, mission beyond organisation, and we know in Cloughjordan, where there's maybe 15 different organisations and entities working in the same land, that you need that sort of awareness of complexity and be able to work with others in an ecosystem, moving beyond the institutional ego. And that sort of, for me, that sort of public-civic partnership, where we're actually working in common together on a common purpose, is really strong when it's like this, rather than just one organisation in relationship with one funder. It's a bit more dynamic. So for Tessite in Cork, is there a civic partnership there, or how does it work? Do you have relationships with the local authority? Give us an example of how it works down there in Cork.
I think Tessite, it merged in a very strange period where everybody was stuck on Zoom and everyone had kind of retreated back to their own space. Actually, really had begun to reconsider how important civic space being held collectively, that actual collective, physical collective assembly, and the idea that space actually, again, you know, the idea of the commons had re-emerged. It had always been there, but it had re-emerged into people's consciousness. And I think Tessite therefore fell at a very pertinent moment where the local council were really on board and supporting it. We as artists were really on board and supporting it, and the local community, be they business owners, residents, you know, youth groups, gardening groups, everybody there was a huge appetite to come and support it. One I suppose really nourishing example for both Eva and I was collaborating with Mehilmara. The Mehilmara Community Boatyard, and again located near a sawmill, or what would have been sawmills in Cork history, and they empower people through making. So they make curragh boats, and it is not the end product of the curragh that matters, but it's actually the process of learning, of empowering somebody else to take part, to come on board this process of learning. And I think that is the core element, or the example of civic partnership for us, that this space was held through Eva's documentation, the performances, you know, these layered activations of a place or space. We held a safe and welcoming environment for people to come and join in civic partnership. So we're under no illusions. This takes years to develop and sustain. We feel we've held a space, open conversations to open relationships, and civic partnership can continue to develop from within it.
Maybe build on that, because it's interesting. Thanks for that. Just how to ensure engagement then. So you've got your different partners, we're working in a civic partnership, and now we've got to engage the people of our places. It's never been so important right now, the just transition, that we need to ensure that all voices are heard. So maybe we'll come back to you, Matt, and we'll go through again, just be, how do we ensure that engagement? How can we get that diversity of voices that are needed for healthy placemaking?
Yeah, I think the mantra we have is about finding the right questions rather than trying to find answers. And I think you're quite right. The sort of magic bullet, in a way, that the arts can maybe bring here is as a means of including some of those voices that aren't being heard. You know, I go into so many meetings with council, etc., who talk about consultation, but really what they mean is going to the consultative bodies and gathering, but then really, and yet they all say we need to reach a bit. I think that's something that we can bring, and I think but that sense of like, what are the right questions? Ultimately, the right question, there is one question, which is what do you want to see happen? I think what place do you want to make? How do you want to part that place? So it's finding the right ways to ask that question. Because if you go along and just directly ask that question with a clipboard, you're going to get an answer that people think they want to hear, because you're going to be representing authority. Yeah, so you need to create the atmosphere that you would have after a future round at 3 o'clock in the morning in order to get the kind of like the trust to, and that's the kind of work that we're seeing from Rosie and Ailbhe there, of creating those spaces and situations where people feel comfortable and included to speak.
So let me just try and recap then. So it's about creating the place, the space of the conversation, provocative or juicy questions that might attract people in or seem relevant, but still I'm uncertain of how do we ensure this diversity, that all voices are included. Rosie, any thoughts on how we address that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I would have, like, for me, what's become really important is, you know, sort of knowing it's, you know, yes, we're in this sort of open-ended arts process and questioning, but for me, it's become more and more important, especially when you're working alongside communities that are maybe not always included in consultation processes. We have to be very aware of where we are going, because often communities are brought in processes without having a clarity. So I think early on we heard from Galway City Council and this wonderful project Luxman did engage young people in the development plan, and I suppose for me that kind of process really rang very true, that everybody involved in that process, there's a civic partnership, but there was everybody knew where it was going. And I think some of the early work that I was involved in, it was this sort of open-ended process. And I think that those projects were catalyst projects. I learned a lot around sort of co-design processes and how to run workshops and how to engage people in place. But more and more, we're now really working in situations like with town college projects. They're all much larger community-led projects that we're facilitating, but that we're normally now invited in by community. So it's not even a case of what questions to ask. We're being asked questions. We're being kind of put into much more kind of clear situations where people need support to get to the next stage.
Ailbhe, any insights on how to maximise engagement?
I suppose one example, just to reach maybe voices that aren't otherwise reached, one which we found really rich and encouraging at a time when everything is, I suppose online, was all remotely driven. We actually walked door to door, knocked on doors, not knowing who was behind the door in our neighbourhood, which we had introduced ourselves into this neighbourhood, which was very long and well established, and we just spoke to people. So we didn't assume that somebody could read what we were saying online in a piece of paper. We just went there and spoke to the community, asked them what did they want, what did they like, what did they not like, and actually just didn't fear, because it's a word that came up several times today, that sense of fear sometimes, oh, have I met all of the audiences, or have I reached everybody? Actually just keep trying to reach more, keep asking more questions, never fear the question is the wrong question, because if it is the wrong question, someone will correct you and give you the question you should have asked them. And that example, just going door to door, was profound. I think it's been seen time and time again. You reach election or referendums and you see people coming out and knocking door to door, but so much of an urban space, which is where my context is, you become so anonymous, you become consumed by the urban infrastructure, the city buildings, and you forget how simple it is to ring a doorbell or to knock on a door. So that for us was an example of trying to reach some people who would otherwise not have found us.
I think today I've listened to a few things where I really saw bringing a playful element in, or bringing food in, so they were meeting around, gathering and having conversations around food, but we're not going to a meeting. And especially in the workshop I was in at lunchtime, into the smaller groups, people that are maybe more introverted are going to find it difficult to speak in a big group, but in a smaller group they can engage and participate a little bit more confidently. We've actually come to the end of the session. I'm going to end with just a sort of closing statement from each of the panelists. I might start with you, Tom, just on our theme here, the sort of idea of artist-led regeneration and civic partnership in community placemaking. Tom, a final response from you?
Yeah, well, I was hoping to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about how this affects practice, but it's a point that's raised by Rosie and Ailbhe, that there needs to be structures and frameworks in place to support these processes. And we would like to see in the future policy developed to support community-led development in Ireland, and also appropriate support structures.
Thanks, Tom. Let's go to you, Matt, and then Rosie. Final word or provocation or something to leave with.
I think I'd leave you in terms of the civic partnership and the different roles or responsibilities. A lot of it comes down to values for me in the way that you negotiate that, and we talk out the key values of the way that we work in partnership like that as being risk positive, collaboration, and acknowledging emotion. The three which stand pretty strongly against the way we understand bureaucracy at the moment, but I see a little bit of shifting and beginning to blend.
Yeah, thank you. Rosie?
Probably just the title of today is artist-led, community-led placemaking and artist-led regeneration. And I would just like to say, I think certainly I feel much more comfortable with this notion of artist accompanied, so accompanying community-led processes. And also, I'd just like to say, I think I was yesterday, Hannah, who's our creative producer in Workhouse Union, we were meeting wonderful community called McGrath, exactly around the Keith Amphitheatre, and we had been meeting them in their beautiful amphitheatre until now, outside, and stepped into their community centre in Kilmanagh, and I felt out of my comfort zone, and I just, I think this work one is always stepping into something new and out of our comfort zone, and for me, that's important, that we never kind of start falling into methodologies or best practice or, toolkits. I think, if you're accompanying, you're always stepping into other people, into new spaces out of your comfort zone.
We could have a whole conversation around that. Would be great. Ailbhe, closing statement.
Yeah, I'm going to build what you've said. I think the idea of creating agile space, be that in your practice, in a process, or in the product, whatever the project itself is, that you just don't lose sight of the fact that if you step into the unknown and into the position of the potential to fail, remember that you're not in the unknown alone. The discomfort that you feel is shared by every other person who comes and forms part or becomes civic partnership. And remember that it's that collective discomfort. That's where the magic happens. That's actually where change can emerge from, it can grow from. But never to lose sight of the fact that yes, you are individual, but you will never exist as an individual alone. And just that collective discomfort becomes collective potential.
Love it. Maybe that's a good point to close on. So thanks, Tom, Rosie, and Ailbhe. Thanks for listening. Sorry we couldn't get more engagement. We had a bit more time. And thanks for the Art Council for inviting us to participate. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. You're there? That's
yeah, yeah.
Do you have a nice view of the green?
Nice view of the green, yeah. And it's a great recreational facility.
Yeah.
And the amount of walkers in the time that we've gone through, everything else, it's great to have that within the town. Yeah. But I think one thing that I noticed, especially over the winter when everybody couldn't go there, that run out of lights very quickly.
So that's very poorly at night time.
Town Ecologies is a project that was imagined by Callan Workhouse Union over a series of conversations that were had about planning and architecture. They've been facilitators of thinking in the area for a number of years now, and worked with us and with Kenny Council and a number of other partners around the country in planned processes.
Exist business here. Is there business owners who live here?
Yes.
There are, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Ray.
Yeah.
And Thomas. And John Sheen.
Is this the only place for the class?
Town Ecologies is a project we're delivering Kilkenny County Council and Kilkenny League Partnership. It's funded by the Arts Council, and for Workhouse Union it's a really lovely learning project that is building on a lot of our previous projects we've done here in County Kilkenny. And with the Arts Council support, we've been able to provide a really, I think, meaningful opportunity for emerging architects and designers to work very much in a community-led context.
Would you where the artists come from the green room you've just shown you out onto stage, and we were thinking we might like something developed here.
And it's a key question, how do you engage the people that live in places in meaningful planning that determines the quality of place they live?
You sort of see that the venue and the choir trying to sort of think about this sort of space, and it's a very hard thing to understand in photographs that how can sort of
So the three community contexts that Town Ecologies is taking place in: Donaghmaggan, which is a small village; Ballyregget, which is quite a vibrant town; and then Ballykeefe, which is a community-led amphitheatre music venue.
Encore, sorry. So we're having screaming come out, and it's a long walk back here to not be seen. You do some of them that kind of hide behind canopy, or as Kelly went, look, keep chatting for 5 minutes, I'm just going to stay here and I'm going to sing again, because he wasn't going to walk.
We felt in those three communities there was a very, very strong community-led process of renewal and vision for the future. It's very much taking in the current policy, economic, social context. So they're really, really kind of rich and very energised opportunities for the town of Galway's architects. Over the summer months, kind of June, August and September, those teams then came and spent a week here learning from work on the ground and mentored by Martin Rafter, leader, and Ellen Gray in County Council. So it's this really nice layering of organisational support on the ground learning, and then innovation and imagination that the town college's architects and designers are bringing to those three projects.
Work on buildings, they work on waste. Yeah. And I think the key thing of it was the quality of the engagement that was had with people who would benefit from the plans, i.e. the people who live or work or play in these places. It's really good for us because we got three really amazing sets of people who I think we've learned a lot from, but I think the feedback we're getting from them is that they've actually learned an awful lot from us in terms of imagining how to speak people to the places that they live in, how they imagine what the place should be like. How you also introduce other concepts, climate, or bringing other people in from the margins of the place that you make live in into that planning process as well. We're coming to the end of it. The feedback from the groups who engaged, the three sets of people, have been really, really strong. And I think what we wanted from this project was not just a set of experiences of the architects, which is really important to the core of the project, but there's a product at the end of it for each of the three sites, that they've got some kind of basis for some kind of strategy for development of the place that they're working or living in. And that then can be taken on to another stage, and the products are identified and realised, and components of that plan are moved along the short to medium term.
If there's anybody there who hasn't been to Ballykeefe Amphitheatre, make sure you do go to Ballykeefe Amphitheatre. It's one of the most wonderful venues in the country. Now, thank you, Davie Philip, for that great session. And thank you also to Matt, to Rosie, to Ailbhe and Tom. Over the last 2 days, there have been ideas, emotions, there have been all sorts of things. And how we put all that together? I don't think it'll be a very easy thing to put together, but it's a very, very innovative way now that we're going to see how it can be put together. We've heard from lots and lots of people, and everybody, I think, has had enormously good conversations outside. So I'm delighted to introduce back on stage Davie Philip, and he's joined by Felix Weeks, who is Felicia Olasanya. She is one of the most exciting spoken word artists we have in the country. I'm looking forward to this.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. I hope you're all doing great. Thank you for staying for this last section. Thank you for your attention and your time. And also, I'd like to thank the Art Council for this incredible conference. I'm actually having a blast. I think it's kind of quirky, so like me, but enjoying it so far. So, this evening, before I introduce myself and yak your ears out, myself and Davie will be offering reflections and short provocations of our thoughts on places at a conference, and I hope you enjoy them. So firstly, my name is Felicia. I go by the stage name Felicia Speaks. I'm a performer playwright, and it's an honor to be here, obviously. There's a few things about the conference that has struck me over the past few days. The first would be that I was quite struck by the keynote speaker, Valerie, that was speaking this morning. She was talking about the architectural perspective of things. I thought that was quite interesting because when we think about places, we think about people first before we think about the structure of the actual place. And I started thinking a lot about what Valerie mentioned on the Irish people building parts of their towns, how that is a history left as a mark around the country. And I thought that was both a metaphorical and a literal reclamation of space. And I thought that was so powerful, the idea of taking back space, taking back the space in order to take back identity. I thought that was quite profound because I think something can still be replicated as something that we are actually naturally doing. The other thing that struck me in conversation was yesterday when the panel discussion of the tomb residents and the artists that were involved in the creative spaces and creative lives. I thought was really interesting because they were also adapting or using the idea of reclamation of space and place. And without going into like the yada-yadas of what we know about tomb, I thought that was all I did know about Tomb. The first thing that obviously comes to our minds. I thought it was quite powerful that Tomb was given a new identity, new wash, by reclaiming space by community members as well as artists. So they changed not just the story of what happened to the place, they're giving the place its own stamp. So instead of accepting the reality of something that happened, I think it was interesting to change the identity of the space by actively being part of it. You can nod aggressively if you like. Sweet, it's awesome. I think another thing that was interesting, and this said, forgive me for forgetting your name, but this was said by the Portuguese choreographer, and she was marvelous. She mentioned being a non-native plant, and as a non-native plant myself, I thought it was really inspiring that non-native plant can take root here and add to shape and identity of a place. And I thought that was fascinating because I thought that applied to me. An example of why this stayed with me was, I think this was actually yesterday. Yesterday evening, just before we all dispersed, I had this moment with Sinead O'Reilly, who's awesome. Sinead O'Reilly introduced me to, I actually don't know this person, terrible names. Sinead introduced me to a wonderful woman, and I remember the woman mentioned, oh, yeah, that's from Longford too. I remember going, oh, that's cool, I'm from Longford. And Sinead was doing the whole Longford thing. And at this moment, someone was looking at me, couldn't tell you where you're from. And there was another moment where she paused and she goes, you wouldn't be a poet now, would you? And I was like, yes! And I thought it was amazing because she had no, I'm sure she doesn't remember my name, which is totally fine, nor my face. But I think moment of, again, being a non-native plant that can take root in a space, that can add to the identity of the space, was marvelous. And I felt like I lived an example of that moment while I was like, thought processing for this moment here. Thanks, laughing at jokes. I suppose my last reflection I was reflecting was that artists are not rescuers of derelict spaces or derelict places. I thought about that over and over again as we thought about or discussed the role of artists in places and the importance. I thought, yes, we are important to place, but we are not the rescuer of place. I think one that was too much. We already have egos, we're artists, relax. I think that puts a lot of like unimaginable power into like, a sect or a group of people's hands. I think that conversation was brought back into the room when someone mentioned that they're not placemakers, and I thought that was cool. And I took that on and I said, okay, yes, not placemakers, but place markers. I think the idea of bearing the mark of place always and leaving one in return is important as people, not just as artists. And I thought about also that art shouldn't be called in when the place is in danger, right? When space is in danger of sliving. I don't think that's when you bring in the artist. I think, yeah, that's not when you bring in the artist. I thought a lot about, like, when do you bring in the artist and what's the role of place marker do? And I thought, actually, all of us are the place markers, not just the artist, all of us. And the reason why every single person is a place marker is that as human beings, we are creators. And as creators, we create the realities and truths of place that we live in. And those are my reflections. Thank you.
You'll hear some provocations from Felicia in a second. So yeah, I'm not a doctor, but I am a culture creative, and I really appreciated this deep dive into creative placemaking. So thanks for the organisers for inviting me. I live and work in a wonderful place in Cloughjordan today. So I know how much place matters and the importance of community. So I'm just going to make some reflections on some notes I took at the sessions about today. And I think just to start, place matters, especially in the challenges we're facing, the disruption that we're facing. We really need healthy places to cope with the unraveling that we're seeing. A pride of place matters. An appreciation of our places is so important, not just to protect that place, to regenerate that place, but I think even for our mental health, that sort of appreciation, that love of the place, the people and the environment around us. Cultural care, I heard this morning, is important to nurture. A care for ourselves, and again, a care for each other, a care for the living world around us. This really embracing difference. We heard how important collaboration is, and cohesive places need that collaboration. Especially this time where we live in such an atomized, fragmented society. You know, there's an opportunity, I think, for creative processes to bust silos, to help us imagine what could be, maybe to even critique what is. So I think the resilience of place matters. I didn't hear that. I'm going to use that for my provocation in a second. But I think we did hear that, you know, navigating the uncertainty that we face now together in our places needs a deepening of the relationships, the knowledge of each other, the place, and the living world around it. If we're going to thrive in this uncertain future, then we really need, I think, to deepen our sense of place, progress our pride of place, and really creatively make our places work in the context of what we're shaping. So we have cool little call to action, provocations.
You should pair us together, more. This is the vibe. Okay. So my provocation / call to action is this. Started with a question. How do we impact place / home or towns without an emergency approach? Because that's what I was thinking about all morning. I was thinking about the phrases that come with prevention instead of the cure. Then I thought about how the Globman team, as well as we, the public, had the right idea. I thought that was really interesting how they went straight for the kids. They went straight for the youth. And I thought that was interesting because engaging young people about their thoughts and plans of the city increases a sense of pride from the bottom up, and maybe not necessarily bottom up from the child to the adult. Just because children, I don't know about you guys, but children make their parents do everything. Like, send them home with stuff that has to do with school. I remember what are these things called? You know, when you went door to door and had to you had to get your family members or your entire neighborhood to give you €2 for a piece of slip, just so that at the end of the month they could come in and for a chance to win a hamper, Tesco boots. Yeah, like it was a whole thing. So I thought about the idea of children being part of the multi-pronged solution to one problem. And I think approaching a problem with multi-prongs is important because, and I titled it this, the Tidy Town Route. And I call it the Tidy Town Route because, again, I'm approaching this not as an artist, but as a young person that was once younger and is kind of trying to be an adult now. And the Tidy Town Route was it. The Tidy Town Route is really important to me as how I engage in community because I remember it started from primary school. They had us planting, they had us picking up rubbish, and they had us be proud about it. Like, really, they got kids to be excited about picking up litter, recycling, growing things. It was really, again, a multi-pronged solution to one problem. And then it was only until I became an adult I realized and recognized that adults were part of it too. The Nosy Mums Club, the librarian, there was multiple prongs to the Tidy Town solution. And also, I thought that part of the multi-prong thing was the fact that we had a green flag so you could see something that we could be proud of. And there's carvings that driving into every town, it's carved right there. Hi, we're a Thai town, we clean for a living. Like, there's a whole theme around it. So I think, one, back to my point that the Gluckman and we publics were very interested in finding young people first, have that as the primary approach to solving big communal problems. And my last thing, to leave you with a little nugget, so you guys can have something to remember, and this is what people do at the end of their talks. But my nugget is this Toni Morrison quote that says, as you enter positions of trust and power, because of the influence of child, dream a little before you think. Thank you.
Thanks, Felicia. So I think really we have a responsibility to transform and regenerate our places. More than any other time, our species really have to change our behaviour, our values. And I think there's a role there for the culture creatives, the artists, to do three things. This is my provocation, my call to action. Artists, culture creatives, disrupt. We have to break out of our traditional ways of thinking that have been reductionist, individualistic, and based on consumption. We need to move from that individual to the collective. We need to move from the me to the we. And I just think that there's an opportunity here to bust silos and to play a part in bringing more cohesion through creative practices, dialogue, and engagement. The second one is similar to Felicia's there, help imagine. I think more than ever now, we need to be able to imagine what good living, what community living, what places could be, and it'd be even to critique what is and to imagine what could be. And I think there's a role there again for creative practices, engaged artists to play a role there. And the last one, to engage. Really, we need all hands on deck. There is an emergency. The alarm bells are ringing, not just in the last few months with the war, not just with the pandemic, but we enter is going to be the defining decade of our species, the climate and ecological emergency. I'm not going to say much about it, but the need is to engage, is to bring all voices to the table. For a just transition, we need the collaboration, the engagement of everyone in society. And maybe I'll just end with what I thought was fantastic, the new spatial strategy that was launched today in the Art Council. Just that vision, I think, is really resonating with me. Vision for a country where everyone has the opportunity to create, to engage with, participate in, enjoy the arts and culture, regardless of who they are or where they live. So, engage, imagine, disrupt. That's my provocation. Thank you.
I love it.
Was that just a little bit wonderful? Thank you both. It was Rita, I think, talked about being a blow-in, and then I heard you talking about being a non-native plant, and all I could think of was Carl Sagan and that photograph taken from however many millions of miles away of us with the pale blue dot, where there are no blow-ins and no non-native plants. But there's a lot of people here who are very interested in looking after the future of it in creative and practical ways. It has been fantastically interesting 2 days and privileging. Thank you both for summarising everything so thought-provokingly. Now, there's been one person who has been hugely responsible for these last 2 days, and I know she wants to come up and thank many of the people who are helped. But before that, I think you all would like to give a big vote of thanks to Sinead O'Reilly, who has really done an enormous amount of work. Sinead, I think everybody knows it wouldn't have happened without you.
Thank you very much, John. As most of you know, I hate having the last word. But I'm very happy to do it today. I'm not going to reiterate the importance of the theme of the Third Place Matter Conference, as you have heard passionately and you have heard with generous humanity from all of our contributors and during conversation over the past 2 days. Neither am going to sum up or reflect back, because Davie and Philip have just done that perfectly. And over the coming days, nuggets and bits of wisdom that you've heard will resonate with you in different ways, and they'll be different for different people, and they will begin to percolate into the work that you do. I'm hugely privileged to work so closely with so many who stand shoulder to shoulder with the community, and the community they work with, especially local authority colleagues, who do this day in, day out. And this is work that happens quietly. It's work that happens on streets, it happens in community centres, it happens in parks, it happens in pubs, it happens in places that are everyday places to us. And this quiet work often doesn't get highlighted, it doesn't get a spotlight on. And this is what today is about. There's a humanity at work that we deserve to spotlight and celebrate and advocate for it even more. So that work is all about collaborating, about networking, and about making space for truth to be told, and that was done over the last 2 days. So thank you to all of our speakers. We had 54, which would be over Pat, day and a half, online and in the room and in the various other rooms around the beautiful campus. Everybody really rose to the occasion and shared so generously with us. It was fascinating to witness how emotive place can be. And I saw that the last 2 days, that emotional response we have to place. It means something so much to us. And when it means so much for us, we'll fight for it. And we heard that also in the reflecting back today on people referencing the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine and how that resonates with us in the places where we live. To all, I'm going to do the thank yous now, so I will keep you because it's beautiful sunshine outside. So to all the artists who've been part of this programme, thank you so much to all of our speakers, thank you so much. Particularly Nicole and Cliff and Redden for that fantastic poem this morning, and Colin Roderick for the Dylan Pies this afternoon at lunchtime. To our colleagues in Carl County Council, thanks so much, a warm welcome and supporting us in the journey getting the conference together. The team here at Visual, I'm not going to name them all because there's so many of them, they have been superb to work with, really welcoming, really accommodating, and we've been delighted to be here and to be in Carlow. To my colleagues in the Art Council, Emer in particular, who's been so much the detail of all this, Monica, Maureen, to Joe and to everybody else who supports Sinead, support all the different elements to make it all happen. To Ben and the team at this event, Ben was Chef Ben, he made it all run so smoothly. He is my new favourite person, best friend forever. Thank you so much, Ben. And to John Masterson for so dulcely, is that a word, dulcely, guiding us through the day in a wonderful way. So thank you, and finally thank you all, to all you at home online or at your desks online and here in the room, for joining with us, for sharing this collective moment, reflecting on people, places and the arts. We wish you well in your onward journeys, whatever that might be, and that you find inspiring elements that will make a difference in the work that you do and the places that are important to you. The final words I will credit you to Christine Sisk, who opened with the poem this morning, and the final piece there was, the place is a physical space that we never leave, because it never leaves us. So that's a fabulous one, maybe to fun. For me, that is. So before we go, just Hannah here is going to, as you come out into the sunshine onto the beautiful steps outside, she's going to take a photograph of all you urging from it. So Hannah will give you a wave and look towards her, and she'll will capture maybe a comment and spin out of the gorgeous sunshine of the day. Thank you all so much. Gary and Bo,